Welcome back to Newegg Now. We know that our Newegg fans out there are all about the newest, most cutting-edge hardware, and it doesn't get much newer than Intel's Optane technology. We talked about it before on the show, and now Intel is back with the 905p Optane SSD, which was just officially unveiled yesterday. Here to tell us all about what the newest Optane drive can do for you, we have Ace Stryker from Intel. Welcome, Ace.
Thank you. Thanks. I'm psyched to be here. This is where the magic happens, so it's a privilege.
It is. True story.
Sometimes. So to start things off, what do you do with Intel?
I'm a solution architect at Intel, and I work specifically in the storage and memory group within Intel. So I work with customers and end users, focusing on the Optane products to help them determine, hey, what are the right products and configurations to make the most of this new technology, help them to evaluate it and really find the value of the new technology.
Nice. Okay, so we've talked to Optane before on the show, but just as a primer, get people sort of up to speed, someone who might not be familiar with Optane, what is it, what does it do, and what's special about an Optane SSD versus just a normal solid-state drive?
Yeah, it's a good question. It's a new technology, and the fundamental difference is the memory media that's inside of it. So if you look at most SSDs on the market today, and this has been the way for a while now, it uses NAND media inside. And that's also true of a lot of the SSDs that Intel makes, by the way. We have NAND SSDs as well. But Optane uses a new memory media inside the SSD called 3D XPoint. The physics of that are different, and there's a couple advantages to it. It's what we call bit addressable. If you're writing things and moving things around in NAND, you typically have to do it in big blocks of data, and there's management around that, and there's sort of a performance cost to doing that. Since you're working on the bit level with Optane, you can get better performance out of that. And that really shows up in a couple of ways. Super low latency is one way where Optane's really strong relative to NAND. Also, random read-write performance is really, really good, and particularly at low queue depths, which is where we see most of the real-world workloads. So Optane really is kind of engineered to shine in those areas where folks are actually working and playing and using their storage.
Nice. So how would you describe the difference between Optane memory and Optane storage?
It's a couple different applications of the same 3D XPoint media, right? So the SSD is pretty straightforward. It's a drive that you'd put in your system, perhaps in place of a NAND drive, or perhaps if you're looking at some of our products, you might use one as a boot drive, and you might have a storage volume. But it's blazing fast storage, right? The memory module is a smaller capacity, and it's in an M.2 form factor. Those come in 16 and 32 gigs right now. And what those are meant to do is to be paired with slower storage, either hard disk drives or SATA SSDs, and to act as a cache accelerator. So as you use it, the system actually views the hard drive plus the memory module as one volume. But as you use it, the memory module is sort of learning what files you're accessing most often and caching those so that you get access much, much faster. And so the goal with that technology is sort of, you can get high capacities with a lower sort of total cost of ownership with a hard disk drive or a SATA drive plus Optane versus just a big capacity.
Right. And so one of the areas when we were talking about Optane in the past was that this was a step above just some of the other hybrid solutions that other manufacturers had come up with for, just creating a cache. But this was more sort of an aggressive learning algorithm as to how the computer was, or resources on the computer were being utilized.
Yeah. So it's got algorithms in there that are trying to understand what are the things that users are doing most frequently. What are the things where the performance constraints due to storage, right? And it's trying to sort of optimize your experience around that, and to bring those things into and put them on the Optane drive, where it's going to be much, much faster than HDD or SATA drive alone.
Right on.
So for people who are new to Optane technology, can you talk about the Optane SSDs that you've already released before the new model?
Yeah, sure. So first on the scene was the memory module early last year, and then we had the 900p, which has been kind of our flagship. Which came out toward the end of last year. That's a product that came in a couple different, still comes, not past tense, in a couple different form factors. You had a 2.5-inch form factor, with a 280 gig capacity, and then you had the add-in card, this kind of guy here, at a 280 or 480 gig capacity. Earlier this year, we launched the 800p, which is the first M.2 Optane drive meant to be used as a storage device, right, as opposed to memory modules. And that comes in either 58 or 118 gig capacities as well. So as we kind of get the technology out there in the market, you start to see a product family growing, right? And the idea is to provide solutions and products that are going to work for different customers who are looking to do different things with it.
And so what you announced, what you released yesterday, what you're here to talk about today, moving up to the 905P is another step in that platform, in that product family that you were describing. What sets this apart from some of the previous Optane solutions? Who are you targeting with 905?
So the 905 kind of represents the next step for Intel with this Optane technology, right? And really, we're just getting started with Optane. I mean, it's a technology with a ton of potential, right? You know, we saw some good response from the market and from the press to the 900p, but we also heard a lot from our customers and from folks about what they'd like to see from Optane. One of those things was bigger capacities, right? And so the 905 offers that. The 905 comes in the 2.5-inch form factor here in 480 gigs, so that's about twice what the 900p offers. And then the add-in card here comes in 960 gigs, so again, about twice what the 900p in the same form factor, right? And so that's one difference. Another one is we're using, the technology is maturing, right? And so what you see in the 905p is a media that's higher performance inside, and we've been able to get a little more performance out of that, do some firmware tweaks. And so you'll see, if you look at the specs in terms of reads and writes, you know, you'll see an improvement over the 900p there as well. Operating temperature is higher now. Instead of 0 to 70 on the 900p, it's 0 to 85. So if you've got an environment where you need extended temp, that's an option for you as well.
So just again, how this might differ from traditional solid-state drives, there's a general notion that if you double the capacity of an SSD, if you double the capacity of NAND, that you see that performance bump because of how those things work in parallel. Is there a similar equivalent, like moving up to these larger storage capacities? Is this why we're seeing the advantage, or is 3D XPoint different in how the technology is utilized? So now we're just seeing process advantages over capacity advantages.
Yeah, it's a good question. And one of the unique things about Optane is that you'll see performance that's consistent across the drives. For example, the 905p. You don't necessarily suffer performance penalties because you're using a smaller capacity, right? You're going to see consistency there, and it's also going to have other differences in terms of how it performs over time. The endurance on these things is crazy high. That's one of the things we're really proud of. So if you've got workloads where that is a requirement, then these ought to be very interesting. But sort of independent of the age of the drive or how full the drive is or what the capacity is, you're going to get like consistent great performance from Optane regardless.
Nice.
So you were mentioning the various form factors before. Which form factor has been more popular with the previous drives, and do you have a reason why you think that might be?
That's a good question. I don't know categorically if there's a standout in terms of what's been popular. I mean, if you look at what's existed, with the 900p, you had, if you wanted a 2.5-inch, you had 280 gigs, right? If you wanted to go bigger, you had to go to the add-in card. And so that may have affected some folks' purchasing decisions. If you wanted the M.2, you have the 800p, right? And so to an extent, your capacity will drive your form factor decision, right? Or vice versa. What the 905p does now is it enables higher capacities, gives folks more flexibility in terms of what's actually going to work in their configurations and what they want to choose with a wider variety of capacities and form factors to choose from.
Now, when we were talking about the 900p on the show previously, we spent a ton of time talking about what that drive offered PC gamers. So from a slightly different perspective, what makes the 905p appealing for more workstation-focused builds?
Yeah, sure, and certainly the drive, it's got advantages for gamers as well, right? And we can talk about those. But on the workstation side, that was where we heard a lot from our customers about capacity. and about, hey, we love the performance that we're getting from Optane drives. We love the low latency, especially if we've got, mixed workloads.
Yeah.
If we're doing a lot of random read writes, if we're doing a lot of reading and writing at the same time. These are things that you see kind of in a workstation a lot. Really kind of positive reaction there and good reception. But a lot of those systems require a lot of storage as well, right? And so, the 960 gigabyte add-in card is really, that fills that gap that existed in the product line before.
I mean, it's funny, we're in a market, like, we're talking about terabyte capacities as if, like, NBD.
Right, yeah.
Just like a couple of years ago, like.
DGAF is a new one I heard.
We had a little chat pre-show talking about some of our favorite
Little inside jokes.
PG ways to swear. So we're talking about new technologies, a new process, different optimization or different focus for what we can accomplish with storage. This has to color the conversation from Intel's perspective on things like benchmarks. When we were talking about 900p, there seemed to be a different focus for how to rate the performance on these products versus how we've traditionally talked about storage in the past. How does the 905p differ in those areas, or how does it exceed or improve upon the way that we've looked at storage performance in the past?
Yeah, it's a good question, and I think anytime you've got a disruptive technology, whether we're talking about computer storage or anything else,
this is changing the conversation from like when we had spinning disks to when we went to NAND.
Yeah, exactly.
And so we completely changed like benchmarking. Benchmarking had to follow that evolution to now. Same thing from Intel's perspective. I mean, you guys have to be looking at this stuff internally and saying, like, we have a focus here, and old, you can run it at home benchmark suites aren't necessarily going to reflect what it is that we're trying to accomplish.
Yeah, exactly. And some of our favorite kind of press quotes that have come out that when we have these outlets that are benchmarking these drives and reviewing them. There was one, and I forget the outlet, but
name them. Come on.
It's taken all the fun out of benchmarking an SSD. Was essentially the quote when they were testing one of our drives, because the latency is so low and the performance is so high that it's difficult to characterize with conventional benchmarks. And so a big focus on Intel's part, and then part of my job, is to help folks understand how these things perform with real-world workloads, because that's where this is designed, right? It's designed, and if you run a benchmark, you may not be getting the right look at a low queue depth, where we know like 80% of real-world workloads happen, or things like that. And so, my job is to find software partners to help us tell that story, right? And to evaluate and say, hey, actually put this in a system where you're doing work, and tell us what kind of difference you're getting. Tell us either where you were sitting around waiting for things to load or tasks to complete before, and you're not anymore. Things like that. And so we've had a couple great partners recently that have helped us evaluate some of our newer hardware. If we're talking about the workstation kind of environment, Side Effects is one partner that they make a program called Houdini for rendering effects, and it's big in the entertainment industry and increasingly in gaming as well. So that's an example where they render these scenes that have just really, really intensive, right? There's the test they ran with us, one of them, was a 7-second kind of rendering of like a maelstrom or a whirlpool kind of thing in the ocean with like 1 billion plus particles in it. To render that sucker on a top performing NAND drive took 17 hours for a 7-second video clip. And with Optane, it was 6 hours. So you see quite a big difference.
Yeah.
But I saw in the benchmark there was only like a 2% difference in extended queue depth performance.
That's why.
So NBD.
That's why we hope folks will look beyond the benchmark. I mean, benchmarks are useful to an extent, and especially if you pick ones that are good at simulating real life
what you're
workloads.
working on. Yeah.
Yeah. So Spec WPC is one that's big if you're kind of evaluating workstations, and we've done a lot of testing there. They kind of simulate workloads that are aligned with different segments. So they'll do like a life sciences workload and an entertainment and media workload. And there we see, 3x, 4x improvement.
But it also seems that like a part of this conversation, especially from when we were talking about 900p, is that the full benefit of this can't be realized until you've spent a little time working on it to kind of get Optane primed for your workload specifically. Like, you give this to me for a week as a reviewer, and I plug it into a system and I run a bunch of synths and then say, oh, it did this, this, and this, and this. Like, I haven't even scratched the surface of what Optane has learned about my work behavior.
Yeah, yeah, and what you're describing is really exactly why I have a job at Intel.
Well, we knew we called the right guy to come and talk about this.
Yeah, I mean, if you swap out a NAND drive for an Optane drive today, just one for the other, you're going to see a performance improvement, right? It's a very high-performing drive. It's great. But the nature of hardware innovation is such that software innovation has to also happen to fully kind of enable the power of the hardware, right? And so a lot of the applications that you might run today are written with kind of memory management that accounts for older, slower storage, right? And so one of my parts of my job is to go out, work with some of these software vendors, these developers, and say, hey, how can we actually optimize the way the software is written to kind of fully unlock the potential here, and to take the kind of the benefit you'd get from just a swap and really like kind of tune it to make the most of the new hardware and kind of enable for, you know, what we consider to be kind of the computing architecture of the future.
Right. Now, earlier we had mentioned when we were talking, you know, we said the 905P is great for workstation builds, whereas the 900P was great. We talked about that, the benefits of that for gaming builds. And you said, well, it's great for gaming builds too, but let's get to that later. Let's make now that later.
Yeah.
So tell me how gamers and enthusiasts can also benefit from the 905P.
Sure. Well, one is the blinky lights here, right? That's something that
it's like the most important part. Like, we're going to have this all over the show.
I hesitate to say it's the most important thing that we've done with the 905P, but it is something that we heard from customers that they'd like to see, right?
Okay.
And so I've got this cycling on a fun kind of, you can pick from the 3 colors. This is just something we cooked up for fun to kind of show off what that looks like. You know, the performance improvements over the other Optane products and frankly over the NAND products, those are going to matter to gamers as well. The capacity matters. You know, if you've got a huge Steam library and your habit is to have a lot of games stored locally, you're going to want all of those on fast storage, right? And so, yeah, absolutely, you know, we think this is a great product for gamers as well. And you know, since the launch yesterday, you know, couple reviews are starting to come out, couple sort of press items, really favorable response to this. Do you guys want me to name outlets here, or is that?
Yeah, you can.
Okay, so Tom's Hardware, right? Their full review I think is still forthcoming, but their write-up yesterday, based on their preliminary testing, called it the fastest SSD ever. And I think, don't quote me on this, but I think that the actual term, words they used were by a wide margin. And you can, you know, I encourage folks to go look at that and see. And you know, that's going to matter for gamers as well, right? And that includes some of the more recent kind of offerings by competitors as well.
Right.
So yeah, I mean, that kind of stuff, whether you're playing on it or working on it, it's going to kind of make life more fun for anybody.
Take a step up.
Yeah.
Excellent.
So it's doing well, you would say.
We're excited, and we're just getting started with Optane. You know, like these products we're super psyched about, and there's a lot of value in these. But you know, as we go out there and you know we learn more about the technology and we get more sophisticated and capable in our technology and our manufacturing, I mean, you can expect to see a lot from Intel, you know, to come on the Optane front, because it's just this thing's got huge potential.
Awesome. Well, Ace, thank you so much for stopping by and telling us all about the 905P. You're welcome back anytime.
Thank you. It's been great to be here. I appreciate it.